Welcome everyone to the Fermentation Association's webinar of the Bubbies Pickle Story, Food Marketing Fundamentals. I'm Amelia Nielsen-Stoll, editor of TFA. We are a trade group that was launched to support producers who use fermentation to create delicious and often healthful food and beverages. Our goals are to help educate consumers about fermentation and its benefits, support scientific research into those health benefits, and work with food safety authorities to establish clearer and more appropriate regulations in regards to fermentation. Today, we bring you two great speakers, Bubbies owner John Gray and his marketing partner, Steve Rustad. We've had many questions already submitted and reviewed by our speakers. If there are additional topics you'd like to see addressed, please enter them in the chat bar and we'll get them to John and Steve, and we'll take time at the end for more Q&A. All right, John and Steve, I will turn it over to you.
Good morning, pickle fans.
Morning.
Steve and I have, I think, known each other now for over 40 years. We met back in the late 70s when I was selling insurance, and Steve was what was called an orphan. Still an orphan, is that right? And was assigned to me. He had some questions. I think you were with J. Walter Thompson at the time and just going out on your own. And I was in banking trying to learn something about finance, which turned out to be a smart thing to do. I got from insurance to finance. I sold my way into the bank. Probably that selling experience was some of the best training I ever got, I have to tell you. Taught me to listen to people, watch body language, so I miss not seeing everybody and seeing your smiling faces and trying to figure out if we're boring you or not. I was in the bank. As I say, I got my way into the bank and sort of on a 5-year plan with my late wife, Kathy. We were looking for businesses. We looked at a number of different things, and Bubbies kind of came up out of left field through one of my clients who was a lawyer and had taken Bubbies through bankruptcy once already. So we were really off to a good start. I went down the street to look at pick up a jar from Bon Appetit, for those of you who remember that banner, and took it home and said to Kathy, if we decide to do this, it'll probably take every last dime we've got. And in fact, it did. And that's when we met Steve. So let me let Steve talk to you about his background.
You met me when you had no dimes.
Right. But you were, tell us about what you were doing.
Well, I came to marketing through a circuitous path. At one point, I was a writer for Hallmark cards, and I got into educational films. I got into advertising. I worked for major advertising agencies in San Francisco, almost entirely on food. So that was actually pretty good training. And then advertising was going through some turmoils in the mid-'80s, so I just left and went out on my own, which was about coincident with the start of Bubbies. Let me skip ahead to got some, how do I characterize myself? There we go.
Entrepreneur, which I've always said is French. It means between paychecks.
Well, for me, I'm a, hang on, not ready yet. Still working on the, there we go. I am call myself a jack of all trades.
There you go. Man, that's what I say. I refer to that as our liberal arts education. We do a little bit of everything. But let's get to the kind of what Neil was asking us to do, which was talk about, we've had 3 different titles for this webinar. One is the ABCs of marketing. One has been from maker to marketer, and this last one is the fundamentals of marketing. And I guess I'd like Steve to go through some of this stuff, because some of the video or visuals that we have, and where we started, what we started with, and how we got to where we are now. Because I think what you want to know, or what we've been talking about, is the three big things of marketing: awareness, relevance, and action. And I think what we will do is talk about each one of those things in the context of what we were facing and what we did with it when we dealt with it.
So we expect you to be a little dubious. So that's our vision of you guys expecting us to show you something.
Yeah.
John, go ahead, John.
No, I was going to say, what we know that one size doesn't fit all. Every situation is unique. The basics are the basics, but it's how you approach them. It's the attitude. It's the rapport that you create. Steve said it earlier when we were getting ready for this. You got to be willing to create a rapport with strangers, and I think that was kind of the basic lesson I learned in insurance and sales. So now let me get back to Steve.
So, John asked me, he said, one of the things that we wanted to talk about before we talk about what to do with your marketing is, if you're a company and you need to either hire a marketing assistant in-house or hire a marketing service outside, what are the criteria? And I mean, there are a lot of ways to go about this, but to me, the simple answer, because I think the essence of marketing is not just a relationship, because relationships can be good or bad. So having a relationship with somebody is only the beginning, but to have rapport. And I think that begins with having a rapport with your marketing person, whether it's an in-house marketing person or it's somebody that you hire. There are a lot of people out there that are creative geniuses. I mean, whether they're self-described or not, they're really creative. But if they don't have a rapport or a feeling for what you're saying, then they're just about their creativity. You really need to be about your customers, both you as a company and your marketing person. You've got to care. And I'm always saying to John, it's not what you say, it's what people hear. So that's the essence of rapport, is what is your message? How is your message resonating with these people that are seeing it?
So, right, our goal, I would say, is to open your thinking and open your mind to goals and thoughts and methods that you may have not have thought of before. But Steve, bring up that slide that you just had. That's the original Bubbies label. This is what we got when we took over this company, which was about to go under for the second time, from a very nice old lady who had been making pickles by the poolside at the country club, peeling garlic and things like that. Are you on share screen, Steve?
Yeah, I am. Oh no, hang on.
I'm not seeing it. There's that.
Okay.
Yeah, the first flyer that said, this is Bubbies of San Francisco, which we had to change. But that was our original label. And the artwork in the middle, I always kind of liked. The bubble script was a problem because everybody called it Bubbles instead of Bubbies. But I didn't mind the artwork, and we knew, a number of marketing people, including my former sister-in-law who worked for General Foods. And, she hated it. Other people liked it. I didn't mind it. And it wasn't until we tried to introduce a second product. You'll notice that this is 3 sizes of dill pickles and 1 kosher dill relish. That's what we had when we started. And I thought, oh, that's okay. And there it is in the background. The bubble script was difficult to read. So that was the first change we made, because we wanted people to stop calling it Bubbles. So we went to this script instead, and it helped. It fell short, however, when we added pickled green tomatoes to our lineup back in 92, I think it was 91. because that was another green product in a cloudy brine jar, and it couldn't really be effectively distinguished from the pickles. So people would pick up a jar of pickles or pick up a jar of the tomatoes, and they had no idea which one they had in their hand. That's what made us realize we had to make a change in the label. So
you want to scroll ahead to the label concepts?
Yeah, because that's more of a marketing thing that we did. Steve knew a fellow who had been working with, who was it?
Walter Landor and Associates.
Walter Landor.
The then and now premier developer of brand IDs.
Right. I think they created the brand identity for United Airlines, AT&T.
Yep.
I may get some of them wrong, but it was that on that scale. He had just decided to go out on his own and become a consultant. And I think we might have been his first client. But so we said, okay, here's the deal. And Steve, you can probably take it through this better than I can. But what we were trying to do was maintain our old-fashioned look.
Well, okay, so what John asked me to do was to find a designer, and I knew designers. San Francisco is a hub of both food manufacturing and distribution and marketing, and so I interviewed 3 different levels of companies, and from really large to mid-sized to this young man who I actually known through church. He'd gone on his own, and he had the training from this really big agency, but he could do something that was affordable. So we gave him some criteria. I don't think we gave him a lot of criteria, and he came back with a range of designs, which I will scroll through right now.
Yeah, that was we were trying to look at the old-fashioned barrel. Go back to the grandma, because that was our placeholder at the time.
But the thing that we liked was the very vintage. It was older than retro. It was vintage, the look of it, and that's what we focused on.
Yeah, that was the pickle barrels in the background, and there's a list. We actually still have the jars, and I have to admit to all of you out there that the jars that are darker, those are still. I thought I'd cleaned them all out, but those are still filled with pickles back from 1991. Unfortunately, I don't think they smell very good anymore. Anyway, so that was our choice. We couldn't afford a focus group. We couldn't, go through some of the more formal reviews that one might go through today. So we basically took our jars and labels around to neighbors. We took them to strip malls and just set up a table and said, passersby, which one of these labels do you like the best? Which one speaks to you? And at the end of a couple of weeks of this kind of down and dirty research, it was quite clear what we wanted. And we were looking for, then we were looking for the right grandmother. And that proved problematical until we looked up on our own mantle and saw this picture of Kathy's grandmother and grandfather. And we thought, wow.
And while it seems, it's probably pretty obvious, but maybe worth stating for the 1 or 2 of you who aren't conversant with Yiddish, this was actually Kathy's Bubby, her grandmother.
Right.
And again, a little bit of trivia, granddad is Zadie. So this was Kathy's Bubby and Zadie. And we then put her on the label.
And it worked. And I will never forget Bill talking to me in his low-key way and saying, John, with these new labels, your product is going to go flying off the shelf. And I kind of patted him on the back and said, yeah, Bill, God, that's great. Really looking forward to that. What happened was that when we introduced those new labels on our jars to the market, our sales grew by 40% within 3 months. That's the power. And so one of the things that I wanted to say, and particularly, was your label is your face to the world. And you need to spend the right kind of money until it hurts, and I've often said, to get it right, because it is probably the most important money you'll spend. We have a number of questions on our board here about people saying, well, what do you do to set yourself apart? How do you talk about probiotics? That's one that I'd like to talk about at some length, because we don't talk about probiotics at all. We make no health claims. We're very careful about it. One of the reasons I got involved with and wanted to get this fermentation association started is because the FDA refuses to deal with what natural is and what it means. So,
well, the thing that we found when we were trying to field a product with natural in the title was that it's very contentious. Because there's not a binding legal description, it actually is a magnet for people to sue you if you put natural in there. What is natural? I just wanted to make one comment about probiotics, and that is your product may start out rich in probiotics from when you make it. If it is not refrigerated, though, successfully through the entire process from manufacturing to being delivered to the hands of the consumer, as you fermenters know better than I, your little squiggly guys are dying off at a precipitous rate. So if you manifest a certain probiotic level, you need to be able to test it, not just at the time that it's released or shipped, but after it's been on the shelves, because at some point you can be challenged for the actual probiotic value of your product when it's consumed. And if you have to have any kind of heat treatment to keep your product from continuing to ferment in the jar while it's on the shelf, which can result in, as I'm sure some of you know, products exploding, that also tends to retard or even kill the probiotics. So all of that is, if you're going to talk about your probiotics, you better be legally sure that what the consumer is getting when they crack open the jar is what you are promising them, not just what you made originally.
As a result, we've completely stayed away from making any claims about health, probiotics, or anything else, because you can't prove it. Or when we've tested our products over different years, we've gotten completely different results every time. So what we realized, I think after several years of working on this, was that what we're all about is an authentic, old-fashioned quality product that would have come out of Bubbies' kitchen. And the fact that it's good for you is because it's authentic, old-fashioned, and something that would have come out of Bubbies' kitchen.
I mean, it's good for you in the sense that it doesn't have a lot of added things which are potentially bad for you, or at least aren't necessarily nutritive. Because we're a kosher pickle, we had to be certified, and John can tell you what the actual certification is. But one of the things we realized was that, and John will talk about this later on when we get into distribution, was that the kosher symbol is viewed as a kind of good housekeeping seal of approval by people who don't necessarily keep kosher, but recognize that it is a sign of purity. So having the kosher U on our label already made us seem more healthful. The other part of it was pickling has been around since forever. It's the oldest method one of the oldest methods of food preservation. And we won't go into that in too much, but the point is that by having a naturally fermented pickle, we had a product that was very basic, had no additives other than the spices, and was perceived as healthful.
And we were launching this at a time when naturally fermented pickles had already been replaced by the Clausens of the world. And you know, the Clausen type folks, and I spoke to one of their people at great length, was to say, what do you want, this dirty water, right? We have our cloudy brine. So we had to deal with that. And it was actually my dad that said, maybe you should just put that on the lid, you know, shake until cloudy. And we ended up putting the cloudy brine story on the top of the lid as well, for people to understand that that was okay. What happened then was we met a fellow from, actually from San Jay at a California Grocers Association trade show. And he said, gosh, you guys are a natural product. You should be in the natural food stores. And I said, oh, are we? I didn't know that. Okay. And then he went a step further, for which I will be forever grateful, and gave me a 10-page typewritten tome of all the natural food distributors that they worked with across the country. And I just started calling them. So there we go. There, yeah, that's a good one. Now go back to that, the other one. Let people read some of that, because I think the copy on some of this stuff is really good that Steve did.
Just earlier, before we changed the label, one of the things we talked about was, you know, if you look at the headline on the right, it said, people love our all natural pickles for the things we leave out.
Right. Which gets us also, I don't want to forget to talk about how we've targeted our market, again, without any money. These were ads, and Steve loves to tell me that we've never done any real advertising, and I think that's close to the truth. But what little advertising we did do, we did in the Jewish press in the Southern California, Los Angeles area, because it was relatively inexpensive. It is our target audience, and they talk to each other. The whole point of basically what I consider guerrilla marketing is getting people to talk about you. So this is the kind of thing that we did, and it was to a pretty targeted audience, but it was an audience that we could afford. Today,
we also saw the value of our Bubby as a spokesperson with a little bit more authenticity than Betty Crocker, because everybody was familiar with the metaphor of the Jewish grandmother, and what the Jewish grandmother is always, you know, eat, you look so thin. Well, so we had that going for us, but we decided to do, among other things, to really make a lot of use out of her. And one of the concepts we developed early on, and these were mostly trade ads, so they didn't run in a lot of, we couldn't afford mass market publications, but we conceived of this idea of what it would be like if Bubby was to tell her grandchildren about her life. And so we had this whole concept of Bubby as this kind of Paul Bunyan-esque legendary mythical figure. And that's animated a lot of our, no pun intended, though we did do animation with her, so I guess there is a pun in that. Where we took our Bubby seriously. Again, in two ways though. We don't pretend that Bubby exists, and so we don't have Bubby directly correspond with or reply to consumers. Bubby is in some ways a character or a mascot, but she also stands for certain really valuable traditional principles, like home cooking, kitchen being the center of the house, taste is important, how you live your life is important, being authentic and honest is important. And we've tried to use those principles as guiding principles in not just our product development, but our messaging and the way we treat our customers.
And we've stayed very consistent with that over the years. And you know, when we go to a trade show, we have as many exhibitors coming up to our booth and telling us how much they love our products as we have buyers and other folks. So it's really, you know, as you get down sometimes and you think, oh my God, we've got to go to another trade show, although trade shows may not exist anymore as far as I can tell. But when you go to one, you say, oh God, we've got to do the traveling, we've got to stay in a hotel, we've got to get all our stuff in the door, past the unions, and, you know, set up shop and all of the rest of it. And then when we would do that, the amount of energy we would get back from our customers and fans was just amazing. I mean, to deal with people face to face is huge. And that's why I miss not seeing everybody today. But it makes a difference. When we when we were replaced by a major natural food chain with a private label. Every once in a while, a lot of retailers decide that they can make more money if they do a private label and replace the national brand. Well, what's happened with the rapport that we've built with our customers is they get angry and they call us and they say, why aren't we in X, Y, and Z store anymore? And I say, well, you know, what we do, and our team has been great at this, is we give them the names and phone numbers of our buyers and say, we want to be back in. We were kicked out of Safeway, I think, twice and went back in.
Sprouts?
That's when the Sprouts happened just a couple of years ago, back into Sprouts. And that happens because of the relationship that you have with your customer. Right now, we are going through a pack size change. And for those of you who understand what that's all about, that can affect your business for a year or more because the distributors or retailers can't figure out that a 6-pack UPC is a different number than a 12-pack UPC. And just because you've changed from a 12-pack doesn't mean you've discontinued your line. And once again, the answer for that seems to be outreach. You talk to the customers, talk to the retailers and say, dude, did you know? You know, we care about you. We want you to be. We get emails from retailers saying, oh gosh, we found we're not on your website search engine. Can you please make sure that we're added on as a location where we can buy your products? Things like that, where we respond to every single outreach from any customer, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, whatever, email. So anyway.
You're talking about trade shows. Tell them a little bit about
pricing.
The Bubby Mobile.
The Bubby Mobile. Yes, or otherwise known as John's Folly.
I think of it as a Fabergé egg on wheels.
Which it is. It started because it was expensive to fly, and we couldn't afford it in the early days, to fly from Stockton to Los Angeles all the time. And even worse with Pickles, which are heavy, as you know, and ours, which are in glass, which makes it even worse. So I was driving to LA on a fairly regular basis anyway. And Steve's partner at the time was a car guy and said, you should be driving a car. And I thought, oh, what a great idea. A rolling billboard makes total sense to me. I won't tell you how many tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars later, we're here and we have the Bubby Mobile, but it does work. I've had, Steve and I did a tour of the Trader Joe's in Southern California back in the early days. And I had not realized that we only had an 8-gallon tank, gas tank. And we spent some, as I like to call it, quality time on the side of the road. But the number of people who would stop to take pictures when even going on the 405 freeway, leaning out of their cars, taking pictures of their car, being at trade shows, having the car there, people would seek us out to have their picture taken with the car. And what we knew was that car people have tremendous loyalty. And it's worked. I mean, we haven't had the car out nearly as much as we would like it to be, and yet it's still an icon in people's minds. And then you will be seeing more of it in the future.
So I can hear Neil in the background saying, get to the 3 principles of marketing. So let me jump ahead. We've already talked a little bit about it. Just for your the way that I think of marketing after however many years of doing this is there's really 3 basic components to marketing: awareness, relevance, and action. People, if they don't know about you, you're dead in the water. If they know about you, but you don't mean anything to them, or they don't want what you make, or they're not interested in you, awareness is not, it's you know, you're trivia. Once you have established, once they know who you are and you've established some value to them, you need, the next step is they have to take some action. They have to contact you. They have to find out where you're sold. Ideally, they buy your product. Hopefully, they talk about you. So the one of the ways that we started out with awareness was just in simple things. We had this tool, this card, and we took it to car events. People love this car. It doesn't really even fit into a category because it's a commercial vehicle. It's a historical vehicle, classic vehicle, but it's obviously commercialized. But again, people just love the car. I don't know enough about car psychology to tell you, but if you have an opportunity to have any kind of vehicle, and again, there's a terrible pun in there as your marketing vehicle, but whether it's a wagon or anything that you can take, a lot of makers start out in farmers markets. So I would encourage you, if you're going that route, to have some sort of rolling display that is, as John said, a rolling billboard. Another thing that we did was we looked at ways. At one point, I went to a National Grocers Association show, and I videotaped Bubby, and I videotaped John giving a talk, and we just released it as a DVD. Anything that you can do, anything that you can do to propagate your story, and we can talk about that a little more. So create awareness. We'll talk a little bit more about social media, because social media right now is the most affordable, pervasive, and popular form of awareness generating. But assuming you have awareness, you have relevance because people happen to like pickled things, how do you provoke action? Well, one of the simplest ways to provoke action is to invite people to try your product. Now, when you're at a farmer's market, you can give away samples, but once you are at a distance from the consumer, how do you provoke? Well, couponing of some kind or other, and it's a little bit more problematic when you're talking about digital or online couponing, but the principle still works, is it's a double-edged sword, because one thing, you're encouraging people, again, getting people to try something because it's free is great, but you cannot habituate your customers to look for a deal. So couponing, as a trial, as to promote trial is great, but as an ongoing marketing strategy, I don't advise it. Another thing that we did was we made sure that people knew that we had not just a line of products, but we promoted serving suggestions. In the Instagram world, that's no news. I mean, Instagramming of servings of food is very common, but 20 years ago, not so much. So we made sure that people knew what we had, but we also suggested how they could use it in an attractive way. And we spent, of our few dimes that we had for marketing, we spent a lot of them just making sure we had really attractive food photography.
Yes.
Early on, we got into YouTube, and we created some somewhat, I guess these are pretty zany, created the idea that Bubbies was going to educate people. And if you have a chance to go to YouTube, you should look at this video. It's probably one of our most popular ones. And it actually has some educational value in that our research showed us there were 4 ways to open a pickle jar. So, but we had fun with it. And that's another thing, kind of going back to the discussion about marketing and establishing a rapport. If you can get people to laugh, if you can be with people who you share a joke with, that is one of the best ways to establish a rapport. When I'm working with creative people, or I'm going to hire creative people, or we're having a creative brainstorming session, nothing works until somebody starts to laugh. Because then you've reached them not in their brain, but at a more basic level. So I feel strongly that humor, properly done, is a very useful marketing tool.
But it is a two-edged sword. You have to be very careful with it. I remember when Steve first came out with the speech bubble over my shoulder. Eat my pickles, it was wear clean socks. marry a doctor. And I said, Steve, they would never say that. They would only say wear clean underwear. It was about, what if you're rushed to the hospital and, you know, the doctor should see. But we did have a discussion at the time whether he thought maybe wear clean underwear is a little bit too risque. So, I mean, the original T-shirt we had with that bubble script on it said, "Eat my bubbies," and we had couple little issues with that.
That wasn't my idea, by the way.
No, you get no credit for that one. But yeah, you have to be authentic. I think you have to have some personality and some energy that comes across the footlights, so to speak, to your audience. So with you know, I want to go now. I'm going back to my notes on the awareness. We updated our label. We did the trade shows. Trade shows are different things now. We did sampling. We had a question about what do you do to create that kind of awareness? We went back, Steve, you've got that FSI that we did way back. That was another couponing thing that we did in the newspapers, but people don't read newspapers anymore. I mean, it's not really an effective advertising method anymore, but it's couponing, and the scale, the balance with the couponing is what Steve said, and I want to underline that, is if you're constantly couponing, what you have done is reduced your price. I've been at various panels where people from the California Agricultural Association have made a presentation that they said there are really only two kinds of viable strategies for any product or brand, and that is you're either the high-end Gucci, highly desirable, more expensive, or you're the commodity. You're the lowest end commodity. And if you're in the middle somewhere, you better figure out which side you're going to get to and get there, and start working on getting there quickly, because you can't last forever in the middle. And I thought about that a lot, and I think there's a lot to be said for that. And
okay, so for fermented artisanal products, I think fermenters fall into the category of artisanal makers. Yeah. One of the benefits from that, I mean, there's certain liabilities, you know, scaling is hard, very labor intensive. But the good part of it is people expect to pay more for those. The same thing with organic. Your market for these products is conditioned to pay a premium for what they perceive to be a superior product. Part of that premium should be used for marketing. It isn't just, you know, and again, John has said, you know, there's a lot of places for your money to go, but you need to invest in marketing. And marketing is an investment, because you're buying awareness, you're buying the tool to establish relevance, and hopefully your marketing is provoking trial, action, relationship, social media engagement.
Let me jump in here and say I've met so many people who either ask me or proclaim that their marketing is a failure because they went into a trade show and didn't sell, you know, 500 cases of product. And I have always felt that you don't really get the effect of a trade show or a marketing initiative for 6-8 months after you've done it. Maybe, you know, maybe as quickly as 3 months in some cases, but we're for the most part talking about smaller companies here. We don't have big TV budgets and things like that. So when we do an influencer program or a giveaway program or something to get our name out and people talking about us, I don't expect instant results. It just takes time. And I think one of the most difficult things to have is patience, to let these things flourish. You don't create a persona overnight.
So maybe we should jump ahead. I don't really know where we are with questions, but I know that there were some questions that we wanted to pose that makers turning into marketers should ask themselves. Should I launch into that?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Well, again, I started out by saying marketing is rapport. So you need to know who you are talking to, who's buying your product. You have The biggest danger for companies is to be in a bubble, or what I like to say, to be a legend within your own walls. That you need to be out there and listen to people, and listen with your ears open, not just the idea of listening for praise or rounding up the usual suspects. Who buys your product? Why do they buy it? Why do they use it? Why do they care about it? That tells you a whole bunch of things. It tells you what's good about your product, tells you what's bad about it. It also tells you where you want to go to propagate your message. Once you are talking about a product, you have to remember that almost nothing that's made or sold is unique. Everything, in some degree or another, is generic. You're not the only fermenter of kombucha or kimchi or kefir. You're not the only maker of chocolate or beer or whiskey or yogurt or cheese or any of that. So you've got competition. The first thing you got to start out with, and this is something that I encountered because I remember the birth of the natural food movement when I was in college in the late 60s and early 70s. And people were talking about how great it was for you and how healthful it was and sort of thing. And it just tasted like rotten grass. And you have to start with, you have to remember that if you're in the food business, food does three things. It's nutritive, it tastes good, or it's entertainment. If your product doesn't start out by tasting good, it can be nutritive as all get out, but people are only going to take it as a form of medicine. So your food's got to, it's got to be taste at least as good and hopefully better than the competition. Health is regulated. As soon as you make it health claims, you're in bed with the Food and Drug Administration. You really don't want to do that. So when you talk about your food attributes, you need to be careful that you're not talking about medicine. I mean, your customers may say that your food is the greatest thing in the world and cures cancer, but you can't say that. Your food, I wouldn't worry about price. I mean, there's, price is a function of distribution. It is a function of your ability to make it and get it out there. But you need to be aware that people expect again, they're willing to pay more for artisanal products, but the more expensive you are, the more fanatical you need to be about maintaining your quality. If your quality is not, if you've got a bad batch or that sort of thing, I mean, up to and including driving to their house personally and taking it back and replacing it with a better jar, you need to protect that perception of your quality, because that goes back to your brand promise, your price. You need to have a story. And I don't mean just a made-up story. I don't mean, that, oh gosh, I've always wanted to ferment kimchi and this is my dream come true. What is and that goes back to what makes your product unique. Again, I can't tell you what's the best story. I mean, we were kind of handed our story by the name Bubby and by the fact that Kathy had a Bubby and we had a great designer who came up with an authentic looking label. And so we just built on that. One of the discussions that John and I have had over the years is not so much what to do, but what not to do. How not to get in our way and prevent people from appreciating what we already had.
One of the things that, let me jump in again real quick and say, one of the things that Steve's always told me is that companies get tired of their advertising far before the public does. And it's easy to feel the need to be changing things around when you don't really need to.
Amanda just popped up. What does that mean, Amanda?
Hi. Are you guys ready for some Q&A?
Absolutely.
All right. So John mentioned how important it is to Bubbies to be communicating with customers. We got quite a few questions about in-store sampling today with coronavirus. What are tactics Bubbies is using to be driving trial today?
Well, I'll let Steve answer that, but I would say we're doing a lot less with Facebook, more with Instagram and influencers.
Well, I mean, again, in-store trials, I don't know about farmers markets or less formal ways of selling products, but in-store sampling is pretty much on hold. It's just too cumbersome, you know.
And the distributors aren't, the reps can't get in the stores either.
So we've worked a lot with, we've evolved our program on Instagram with various tiers of discovery and connection with influencers. Really, influencers, if you go back in the history of advertising, movie stars were used to promote products. Scroll ahead now, influencers are stars, they're personalities. Some of them are more talented than others, but if you can endure the process of finding influencers that really resonate with your product and have a passionate following, those people can build trial, assuming that your product is available to the people that the influencers are talking to. That's one of our biggest challenges, is correlating the influencer message and being able to get the people who are being influenced to the store to find our product. We haven't had a lot of problem with sampling because people pretty much know what our basic products are. We haven't introduced a whole lot of new products that are, at least under the Bubbies mark, that are unique. Going back to what I said though about taste, is the only way that you can establish your product taste is trial. And I would say work with your influencers to figure out a way to get samples. And there are various delivery tools. If your product isn't wet and delivered in glass, you have a lot easier than we do. If your product is something that is lighter and can be shipped, hopefully warm and dry, great. If it's got probiotics that have to be preserved, it needs to be delivered in a refrigerated manner, and that creates its own obstacles. But those are just problems that can be overcome if you recognize that the goal is to get it into people's hands. And influencers right now are the best way to do that.
And just a quick comment on the celebrity aspect of it. I think we got our first celebrity endorsement from Bette Midler back in the early 90s, I guess it was.
Yeah, show of hands in the first row. Who knows who Bette Midler is?
Well, the point of the story, of course, is that it's progressed over time, with our most recent one being Katy Perry when she was pregnant and holding a Bubbies jar. And, you know, those are unpaid, I guess is what I want to say. And I think those are the most valuable, because if somebody's coming on and saying, because we love it, not because we're getting paid to love it.
But it's I mean, again, two-edged sword. Everybody is like, well, I want to get my book, baby wipes, home knitting kit in Oprah's hands. But the top celebrities are inundated by this. You know, if you're going to look for a celebrity, I would find somebody who's got a following that's a little closer to your particular brand or product of stuff. And celebrity can be defined a lot of ways. So ideally, if you've got some sort of outreach, pay attention to the people that are writing you, and maybe some of those can be converted into celebrity endorsements.
Sampling. Now, one more thing on action I'm looking on was the table tints. And I thought those were particularly clever back in the day. If we could just pull that one up. This was from I think this is maybe from the 90s.
92. This was designed that it could be.
Share your screen. Share your screen.
Sorry. This was designed so it could be folded into a table tent without a whole lot of glue or anything.
Yeah, and so it served as kind of a passive way of getting the word out there. You know, you could have it, give it to the delis, whatever. Small cafes, people are being able to go out again and fold it up, put it on the table, and you know, you get people talking about you. I mean, throw a party for your taste buds. I thought that was a great one. What have we missed, Amelia?
All right, next question. Thank you. That was a great answer. We had a lot of questions about social media. So I'm glad to see influencer marketing and social media has been so successful for Bubbies. We also had quite a few questions specifically about
fermented food brands. How do you go about convincing a customer, especially someone new to the fermented food or drink space, that your product is not dangerous?
Well,
go ahead.
You need to start your sales with people who are already inclined to buy your stuff. If I'm selling a fermented thing and I'm talking to people who think that it's dangerous, I'm wasting a lot of time trying to educate them. What you really want to start with are people who are already fans of the product and convince them that your product is the best of their choices or one of the best of the choices. You know, if you can be within the top 2 or 3 products in any category, you're fine. You don't need to be the top selling product. And if you are, you probably can't meet the demand. So you're better off being in the top range of products in a category that people already like. If you've got people who think your product is dangerous, really don't, and I know this sounds kind of callous, but don't waste your time trying to convince them, because you only have so much energy or budget or time to do your marketing with everything else that you have to do. I'd say, you know, it's like triage. You know, you deal with the most easily solvable issue first. You don't worry about trying to educate people who think your product might be harmful.
Yeah, Steve has been consistent with that message over the years, and it's very, very expensive when you have to educate.
And it sounds like it's really benefited Bubbies to have that on your label, that it's supposed to be cloudy, shake it up.
Absolutely.
Do you think that benefits for a startup or any fermentation brand to put that on the label, to know this is a fermented food product? It should look cloudy. It will look different than what you find on the non-refrigeration section.
Yes and no. I don't think you want to raise questions that people aren't asking.
Okay.
You know, if it's like, you know, I know this product looks terrible, but it really tastes good. That may be a true statement, but it kind of starts from the negative. That goes back to my point. If people who are used to fermented products, you know, they're used to the nature of natural foods, that they don't have the same kind of glossy plastic look as ordinary packaged goods. That's why I started out with taste. If something tastes good, people will put up with a lot of appearance issues. Truffles look terrible. Truffles look like something you would not want to put in your mouth, yet they taste great. But if you're trying to sell a truffle to somebody that doesn't know what a truffle is, you're going to have to convince them that it's not some sort of animal scat. So, you know, so again, don't waste your time trying to convert people who are, and I don't mean this in a pejorative way, everybody who doesn't know something is ignorant of that topic. Don't waste your time trying to educate the ignorant. Sell to people who are already inclined to buy your product.
And they will talk to the other people and let them know that it's safe.
Great answer. Great answer. Okay, so we've seen so many new fermented products entering the food industry these days. How is Bubbies making sure you're protecting your position? How are you making sure you keep up with the competition?
You know, let me just jump in on that real quick. We've had blinders on, I think, for the last 32 years. We've been absolutely focused on what we are doing and not so much focused on what others are doing. You know, we're trying to do the best we can at what we do. It's very limited. I remember the old management saw back when I was in banking that said, you know, stick to the knitting, stick to what you know what you're doing. I know there was a question about a person who wanted to expand their business through offering more and more and more products. I mean, it's a viable strategy, but it's not one that I would follow. I want to be the best at what we do. And even though the new buyers out there, especially in the Whole Foods Amazon group, are all looking for shiny new objects because they all come out of sporting goods, we want to be the best at the stuff that sells. You know, kosher dill pickles, regular sauerkraut. Yes, there are other flavors that we could go into, but we want to be the best at those 2 or 3 things that are our top sellers. And I don't really worry too much. I think with real food has become a big thing with millennials, which was another question. How do you relate to millennials? People want real stuff. They want real, authentic, real food, ingredients they can pronounce, that they know what they are.
I got a lot of experience with big agencies, with the consulting firms, Kinsey's and that sort of thing, MBAs. I would not look to consumer packaged goods for guidance how to run my maker business. The idea of line extensions, you've got a brand, you've got to capitalize on that brand with line extensions. Line extensions can bleed a lot of energy and a lot of money and undermine job one, which is selling the product that's actually paying the bills. If one is going to look for marketing guidance, just off the top of my head, and I have no affiliation with any of these products, I would look at like Tom's of Maine or Burt's Bees, or family-based products that have created a fan base through almost anti-marketing kinds of strategies.
Ben and Jerry's.
Yeah, well, yeah, but Ben and Jerry's, they sold out. They're owned by Unilever or somebody now.
But that's not how they started.
But no, they started by being quirky, and so your quirkiness is your advantage when you're a maker, as long as you're not too weird. Remember, you're selling food to people, so you don't want to scare them, but you want them to feel that your stuff is special because you put your own special spices, love, stirring techniques, refrigerating under the dark of the moon techniques into it.
Okay, my last question for you guys. So I'm a company that has minimum time, money to spend on marketing. Where do you invest? Where do you recommend to invest first? Am I looking at my label, my website, my social media, advertising buys? What do you recommend?
Start with the label. Start with the label.
I think that's the right answer. But the question that I would ask is, why do you think you have minimum time for marketing? You have two jobs if you're a small businessman. One is making it, the other is selling it. If you are prioritizing the making and you're putting selling in the back seat, you're not looking at one of the most important parts of your business. Is I think if you have minimum time, you need to look at your apportionment of time. I've met so many people who really love the doing of what they're doing, and they consider marketing kind of a distraction, or have the gal that answers the phone or the guy that answers the phone take care of the marketing because I'm really great in making my artisanal chocolate. Well, no, you aren't making the product so you can squirrel it away in your Scrooge McDuck vault under the house and then swim in it. You're making it to sell to people. You're making something which is going to be part of commerce. The other end of commerce is consumption. If you're not thinking about consumption as much as you're thinking about making, you've got a fundamental problem in your business model.
Steve has asked me to mention that one of the things that we've always talked about, or I've always talked about, is one of the things that small business people don't know is finance. And one of the things I learned in banking is inventory is a problem. If you have too much inventory, that's money that's sitting there that's not helping you. I've always thought, and I've shared this with Steve over the years too, it takes two people. I've seen very few people who can do both marketing and making successfully. Marketing is a different beast. It is, and it almost takes two different people to be able to do that can understand each other, get along with each other, deal with creatives. I wanted to get into that too. How do you deal with creatives, Steve?
Whips and James.
So yeah, because it is a different world, and I think one of the big advantages that we had was coming out of banking. Both my wife and myself came out of banking. Our first employee was my wife's cousin, who was our controller. She came out of banking too. I mean, you have to know where if you watch Shark Tank, you got to know your numbers.
Watch Shark Tank. Okay, so just to get back to that question, and I think that the person or the people that asked that question, label. Your label needs to be, your label is your first billboard. It's your first contact. It's the first promise that somebody sees of the value or benefit in the jar. website. Your website is your international pervasive billboard. But a website is a billboard in the desert. Unless you build a road past the billboard, nobody sees it. So you need to have social media. The social media right now that is the most pervasive is Instagram, followed by Facebook. You can do other things, but if you were to do 4 things, it would be make sure you've got the best label that you can afford, not just the best label that you like, but that resonates with people. So you need to do some kind of research, even if it's just lining up all of your family. Pick a label. Second thing is make sure that you have a clear, functional, contemporary website with lots of images. The internet is a visual medium, so don't spend a lot of time writing your story, show it. And then you've got to have social media. Social media is not for either the faint of heart or for the amateur. So if you're going to be an Instagram, find Instagram pros, find Facebook pros. And as John said, you got to spend till it hurts. You can't. I know a lot of people think that, oh, well, I'm quirky and I can do the Dollar Shave thing and I'll sell my product because I'm just like this charismatic person. No, you want to find people who do that for a living, who are successful at it. You make stuff. That's what you concentrate on. You find people who do good websites and you find people who can do social media.
John and Steve, I wanted to thank you guys so much for sharing your knowledge with us today. Thank you for answering those questions. And thanks to all of you for attending our webinar. We will be posting a recording of it on TFA's website in the next 24 hours. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel to be notified when it's up. We also have a number of great webinars coming up in the next few weeks, including Kirsten and Christopher Shockey. They'll be talking to us about cider making next week, and Dr. Perez Diaz and Dr. Wolf, they will be sharing new and enhanced pickling techniques with us. Please go to fermentationassociation.org to check these out and register. Thanks again for joining us, and thank you, John and Steve.
Thank you.
Bye.